give you an outline of the flow of the program. Okay, so first we're going to hear from Larry Hills. In San Diego, we're going to model our People's Power Assemblies. We're going to model these meetings as the other meetings in the other cities, in Philadelphia, in Los Angeles, in Baltimore, and North Carolina, where they've already had People's Power Assembly. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear from the organizer of the the national organizer of the People's Power Assembly, and also from Reverend C.D. Witherspoon, and then we're going to call the families up. We're going to have a family panel. The whole thing about this is for people to speak out. So I want people to think about what they want to say as they listen to the family speak out, because we want to open up the floor for people to talk and let us know what it is we need to do in our communities, how we're going to resolve these issues. And then the second part of the program, we're going to have organizations come up to the panel and tell what they're doing in the community. How can we resolve our problems? How do we defend our communities? So that's how the program is going to flow. It's going to be speakers, and then it's going to be a panel, and then it's going to be you to speak out. Okay? So we're going to call our first presenter, and this is Larry Hills. Larry Hills came here from New York City. He is the national organizer for People's Power Assemblies. Okay?
We drove, actually, I was in the Bay Area before coming here, and we drove the long way down. I live near the water, I live in Jersey City, but it's much different than actually driving down the coast of California. So it was nice to see, but it's also very tiring. In Oakland, I travel a lot. I live in Jersey City. I'm not from Jersey City. And people introduce me as being from New York because Jersey City is known as the sixth borough. It's closer to New York, to Manhattan, than parts of Queens and Brooklyn, and definitely easier to get to than Staten Island. If you've never been there, that probably doesn't make any sense to you. But take my word for it, if you ever go, you'll understand what I mean by saying that. I've lived and traveled to a lot of different cities, and in my travel, I found places that if I ever get a chance to pick up and move somewhere where I might like to live, Oakland would be in the top 5. Sharon and CD would be happy to hear that Baltimore is in the top 2. But one of the reasons I like Oakland is because of the history of struggle, but also because of the people that I've met there who are involved in the struggle. And you're going to hear about some of the cases, such as Oscar Grant's family is here, and the Blueford family. And their young son Alan, who was shot down, who was executed, really. I never met him, but from meeting and talking to them, I can envision that he was a great human being. And so it ain't easy for people who have suffered such a traumatic loss to get up and speak about it and continue to fight. You face the indignities of having lost your loved one, but the indignity of having to go and struggle and fight for what is right, justice. But they do that, and not only do they do that, but in the process, I've met them sometime last year in New York, when they came to New York. They have taken the individual suffering, individual circumstances, and are fighting not just in their own case, but in general against the indignities and injustices, not just in Oakland, but around the country. So they stand with all the families who suffer having lost a loved one. But I'd like to explain the concept of a People's Assembly. You see, we are told that we live in a democracy because every couple of years or so, we get to pull a lever for somebody to so-called represent us, whether it be at a local level, a state level, or a national level. And if we look at the last 10 years, for instance, and everything that has happened, the legislation that has been passed, the wars that have been waged, we have to ask ourselves, are those people actually doing our bidding, and are they representing in our interest? See, you would not vote to destroy Social Security, would you?
No.
You wouldn't vote to destroy Medicaid or Medicare, would you?
No.
You have no interest in waging war on the people of Iraq or Afghanistan, do you? No. You have no interest in the Pentagon getting $700 to $800 billion a year, do you? No. But this is what happens. You see, we get stop and frisk, broken windows policing, all these different quality of life ordinances that are passed, and in some cities, they're not passed citywide, but they're neighborhood specific. That is not in your interest, but it happens, doesn't it?
Yes, yes.
When we fight for justice and we want something that represents our struggle and actually represents the community to monitor the police, what do we get? Bureaucratic positions that are made and they don't represent our interests, do they?
No.
So how can we actually struggle to represent our interests? You see, we have to fight for real representation, and the real representation is us.
Right.
And that is what we mean by People's Power Assembly. It is not just a meeting. It is not something that we think is going to win justice today or tomorrow. It's a long-term process. It's building confidence in the community to fight for themselves. That's what they're doing in Baltimore. That's what they're doing in Philadelphia. By this model, it's giving you a place to come where you can talk about your interest in your struggle. And you know that this assembly is going to take up your interest in your struggle. Whether it is you are being foreclosed on in your house and you've been in there 30, 40 years, and maybe someone in your family got sick or they got injured, and because of that, you had to shell out a lot of money for the hospital bills, and you had to get an extra loan on the equity that you built within your home, and then the bank comes and tells you that we're going to come and seize your home. So if you need help, who do you go to? You don't go to the bank because their doors are shut to you. You don't go to your local politicians most times because they're going to say, hey, look, they're not going to tell you honestly, but really they're representing the interests of the bank. Those are the lobbyists. You're going to go to your next door neighbors. And what you would like and what you would need and what we want to build is an actual organization that you can go to and say, I need your help. And they will mobilize in your interest and they will help you seize and take and maintain your property. Don't you want an organization like that?
Right. Yeah.
When the city comes to you and says that because of the years and years of disinvestment from the inner city areas, we see the infrastructure in your schools are crumbling, so we're going to close it down or we're going to privatize it. Don't you want an organization that you can go to and say, I want to keep our school open for my children and I want to fight for more resources, not less. That's the problem. We need more resources. You want an organization you can go to and that will help you take over that school, don't you? You want an organization that when the hospital is getting ready to close because of mismanagement of funds, that'll help you fight and keep your hospital open, don't you? Yes. We need that type of organization. That's what People's Power Assemblies are. They're fighting organizations. They're organizations where we go and deepen our understanding of the history of the political movement in this country. And they're organizations that we hope that as they grow and develop, will develop a national strategy to organize and fight together in the long-term dream. You see, Reverend CD is going to talk about May 11th, but what we hope is we want to ignite. And this comes out of Baltimore, what he's going to talk about. I won't go too deep into it, but we hope to reignite the last dream of Dr. King. And you see, if you listen to what the radio tells you every day around Dr. King Day, or what they tell you in school, the only thing that he ever dreamed about was that little black boys and little black girls can hold hands with little white girls and little white boys.
That's right.
That's what they tell you. They don't tell you in that same speech he said he comes to collect on a check that came back insufficient funds. They don't tell you about the speech beyond Vietnam. They don't tell you about where do we go from here. They don't tell you about the Poor People's Campaign. The Poor People's Campaign was going to go to Washington, D.C. and seize it and take it over. That was their dream, to win a job and a living wage for everybody in this country and to put it into war and devastation. That's what we need to reignite. We need to go back to DC. We need to go start at our local levels and build and begin to build a movement at the local level. We need to go to DC and we need to sit on DC because ultimately, to win the society that we need, that we deserve, a society in solidarity where we're in solidarity with one another, not in competition, A society where we're in solidarity with our brothers and sisters around the world who are struggling, have dreams just like us, and wars waged on them in the interests of oil companies and the banks. To win that society, we need power. We need to struggle for power. We need to take power in our interests and take power in our hands, and that's how we build that society. So that's why we hold up the motto of People's Powers Assemblies as a way forward. And I leave you with not just a slogan, but it is a call for action. And you know it because it's been around for a very long time. And I want you to repeat after me. All power to the people.
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 Some people ain't talking. You don't believe in power to the people? All power to the people.
All power to the people.
All right, on that.
The program has to move on, so I'm going to bring up Reverend C.D. Witherspoon. Now, he's the one that made the call in Baltimore doing a Trayvon Martin rally. So, Reverend?
I want to thank each and every one of you for this opportunity. Give yourselves a round of applause. I see the families of so many victims in the audience today, and I just appreciate each and every one of you, because one of the most difficult things that we find is having people with the courage and the gumption and the fortitude to take a stand against the state. Because when you take a stand against the police department, you're taking a stand against the state. So just give yourselves again a round of applause. We appreciate you. As the lawyer so eloquently indicated, of course, when Trayvon Martin was killed, Baltimore attempted, we ventured to do the very same thing that major cities across this country did. And what we did was we organized a protest, a rally, if you will, to show support for Brother Trayvon, but also, of course, to encourage the immediate incarceration of that vicious, vicious dog who took his life, George Zimmerman. Little did we know that at that particular time an outbreak was about to occur in our very own city. What we did was we organized this march, and I remember it so clearly because I was at a church not far from downtown Baltimore, and I was speaking to encourage people to come out that afternoon. And I got a call from my colleague Sharon Black from Baltimore. Please do give her a round of applause as well. She's a giant in this struggle. And I got a call from her saying, Rev, you've got to get here because this street is lined up and people are coming in huge numbers. Now, if you know Sharon Black, you know one of the things that she does is she organizes in a way to encourage people to come out. So I thought she was saying to me, Rev, you're talking too long, we need you to get to downtown Baltimore. But she wasn't. We actually got into a traffic jam getting into downtown Baltimore. There were 10,000 people that gathered in downtown Baltimore to support Trayvon Martin and to demand murder charges for George Zimmerman. And murder charge, that concept is important because we can't be weak about our plea. We can't be weak about our request. We've got to demand murder charges when these people come into our community and kill our children. We've got to demand murder charges. And so what we did at that particular march, and the reason why this is so critical is that what we marched from the Civic Center, the Convention Center, and that's important because that's the economic engine of the city. And you'll see why I say that's important in a second. We marched from the economic engine of the city to City Hall, and we were able to shut down City Hall for 4 hours. The reason why that's important is because in the process of shutting down City Hall, we also shut down downtown Baltimore, which was the economic industry of the city. We shut down every single business that was doing business at the expense of the people, poor working class people who do not benefit from the dollars of the business owners who live in jurisdictions outside of the cities. We don't benefit from what they get. We shut their dollar making ability down for that particular time period. But while we were there, what we said was we asked the crowd of 10,000 people, and I can see, even though the numbers are small, the same level of urgency in the eyes of the people today. We asked them how many people had been experienced police brutality? How many people had family members who were killed by vicious police? And the hands that we saw that went up was just egregious. At that particular time, we knew that we had to do something. And so on June 30th, we conducted a People's Power Assembly in Baltimore. And the interesting concept of that, interesting thing that we had to deal with was that this huge storm came and knocked out power. So half the folk that attended were attended in spite of blackouts, streets were down. Any type of obstacle people had to encounter, they encountered that particular day. But would you believe over 150 people came out to that church to tell their story? Over 150 people came to talk about one lady, one section of the city. Her son was disabled, and a police officer had the audacity to shoot through a rolled-up window, This person did not have, and I use the term person loosely, he did not have enough humanity to roll down the window and to even approach to ask a question. What he did was he reached over through the passenger side window and shot 4 shots out into the general public. 4 shots out into the general public, landing 1 into the stomach of David Yim. You have to know that David Yim is partially handicapped. He's paralyzed on one side of his body. So there was no threat that David Yim could have posed to that particular officer. And would you believe, and the reason why this aspect of it is important is because you have to know the mindset of these officers. One of the citizens who lived in the neighborhood, when they stood up to make a plea and to ask the officers to stop, the officers called the lady an animal. The officers told her to stop acting like an animal. And then there's a situation, of course, where job protesters were simply going and getting what was promised to them by Johns Hopkins Hospital. We're all familiar with Johns Hopkins Hospital. But more importantly, we're familiar with institutions that come into our neighborhoods and do development that displace hardworking, average, everyday hardworking people, the working class people, the poor people, the people of color. And so this institution promised hardworking people jobs. And when the people began to start demanding the jobs, Hopkins did what the government did what big business does. They ignored the cries of the people. So the folk took to the streets, and I'm going to let you know that that's what we should do every single time. We've got to take to the streets. And when the folk took to the streets, because for them it was personal. Because a job for them was their ability to be able to stay in their house. A job for them was their ability to be able to feed their children and to provide for their families. So when they began to do the protest, one protest arose where every single protester was accosted by the police. A small grouping of them, one person in particular, was beaten, he was kicked, he was tasered, he was maced. Every single thing that the cops were big and bad enough to do, they did to this particular gentleman. But one of the things is that when these type of atrocities happen, we've got to come together. That's why these people power assemblies are critical and of great urgency.
That's right.
When we heard about that particular situation, we began to immediately undergird their efforts to take it to the streets. We conducted a press conference to clearly articulate and to provide a picture to this thing, because what happened was nobody was talking about it. Even though there was a video out, nobody did the extra work to put the video on the mainstream. We were able to make that video go viral. And that video went around the entire country. As a result of our continuous protests and our work on that particular case, what we were able to do was we were able to get charges dropped at the system levied to prevent them from continuing to fight and to stall the struggle. But we were able to get those charges removed. And that's the kind of stuff that we have the ability to do, and we come together in the framework of these people power assemblies. The most egregious case, and I mean egregious case of police brutality that we experienced in Baltimore, and I call it police brutality, but I want to let you know that I believe that it is terrorism.
Yes, yes.
It is completely terrorism. We're not concerned about terrorists from other countries doing harm to our people and to our children. We're concerned about people who are from this country, right here, living here, who are working at the taxpayers' expense, who are targeting and annihilating black, brown, and poor children. But one of the things that was the most egregious was the case of Anthony Anderson, and many of you have read about it, we've listened to stories about it, but Anthony was walking on a grassy path at the end of his block, right where he lived. Officers came up to him without warning, without a call, without circling, we talked to you, any type of communication at all. They picked him up in the air like a basketball and slammed him on his head and killed him in the presence of his 2-year-old grandchild, his mother, his children, and every single time his granddaughter thinks of her grandfather, she remembers that her grandfather was murdered by the police on her very own birthday, because that's why Anthony Anderson was there. I said all that to say to you that these people power assemblies is a critical opportunity for us to come together so that we can work together around these issues of urgency to us. And I've got to tell you that one of the clearest examples, and this is why I know that y'all can do it, because of the work that's happened with the Blueford Committee. And y'all just give them a round of applause. We celebrate them, and we see so many other families who are doing the same thing, but I'm appreciative of the dynamic that I see with that committee, with different people coming together from different sections of not just Oakland, but surrounding cities who are coming together to embrace this family, because Dr. King said that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's so right. We can get justice for Alan Blueford, we can get justice for every single victim of police brutality, of police terror in the state of California. So we've got to come together and we've got to share ideas, because for one section it could be police brutality. But for another section, it could be school closings, because we know that in certain parts of Oakland there's some issues in regard to school closings. I want to let you know that in some respects we're sister cities, because in Baltimore we just filed a lawsuit 2 weeks ago against the Baltimore City public school system for closing 11 schools in Baltimore. And the school struggle is a national struggle. They've got lawsuits being filed and struggles being filed across the country, where people are taking back their citizenship rights. And again, this is what the People's Power Assembly is about, taking back your right to fight and to come together. And I want to let you know that the reason why this is critical is because we've got to remain the ground struggle. There is no struggle that can't be won, rather, if we are not on the ground, if we're not fighting, if we're not protesting, if we're not raising hell, if we're not making calls, if we're not going into courthouses and risking your ability to have freedom, like the Blueford Committee did the other day. Some of us are going to have to go to jail for this thing. Some of us are going to have to make some sacrifices for this thing. But we've got to understand that every single sacrifice that we make for the sake of people powers assemblies, for the sake of our own liberty, for the sake of our own freedom, for the sake of our ability to get this thing right. Because I want to let you know that we can't depend on the politicians. We can't depend on the politicians to fight for fair wages. We can't depend on the politicians to fight for quality housing. Brother Hales articulated it perfectly. Right. Washington is listening to big business. Washington is listening to the banks. That's why we've got to take the fight to Washington on May the 11th. The people have got to take the fight to DC. We've got to have victims' families of police brutality. We're working with our Walmart workers for the workers' rights piece. We're going to work with the LGBTQ community, because one of the things is we can't allow for anything to separate us, because a people united will never, ever be defeated. So we've got to come together in this thing. And we have got to be about the business of sending a message to Washington and rocks its foundation. We've got to rock its foundation, because we cannot rely on the big business and the bank interests and the lobbying interests to represent our agenda. So again, I want to thank each of you for the hard work you're doing here. You need to know that we were here in December, we're here now. If you need us, we will come back again. But we've got to continue the fight on the ground, and we've got to continue to build these people power assemblies. Let me say this, and I'm going to shut down. The reason why these people power assemblies are important is because with the Anthony Anderson case, the authorities originally indicated that Anthony Anderson was swallowing drugs, which precipitated the brutal encounter. You and I know there's no justification whatsoever for a police officer to kill someone. But what they did was they used that particular issue as a justification to precipitate the encounter. Would you know, the next day we conducted a press conference. We were able to get into the community and do, guess what? What they don't want us to do. We did a community-based investigation. And the reason why they don't want us to do it is because it requires us to knock on doors.
Yes.
Mother Blueford, it requires me to get to know you.
Yes.
It requires me to get to know you, Brother Adam. It requires me to get to know you. It requires me to get to know you. It requires me to get out there, to get past my ego, is to check me at the door for the purposes of finding out the truth.
That's right. That's right.
We got witness statements from 5 family members that were present and 20 people in the community that were there. 20 people in the community. Now, the police report indicated that Anthony Anderson was following drugs, but there were 20 witnesses outside of his family that indicated exactly what I told you earlier. So once we were able to project the truth, we immediately held a press conference. We requested the autopsy report. The autopsy report came through with no airway obstruction whatsoever. There was no drugs on the scene, and Mr. Anderson's system was completely clean. As a result of our efforts, we were able to get that place declared a homicide. And see, we got to do that kind of stuff. Because if we depended on the reports they put out would have gone through.
That's right.
The state's attorney indicated that they're not going to press charges in the Anderson case. What they didn't know was, and this particular issue doesn't work all the time, we did file a complaint with the Justice Department. But the reason why May 11th is important is because we need to put the feet to the ground.
Yes.
We've got to not only put the feet to the ground for Anthony Anderson in Baltimore, we've got to do it for the Blueford family here.
Yeah.
We've got to do it for Iona Jones in Detroit.
Yeah.
We've got to do it for every single family who has been touched by police terror across the entire country, because police terror is nothing short of terrorism. And officers who participate in these egregious atrocities are terrorists. And this is nothing more or nothing less than the epidemic of lynching faced by us in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. It's nothing short of this. Because police terror targets working class, poor people, and people of African American descent. So I thank you so much for this opportunity, and I want you to continue the fight. And you've got to be about the business that as long as there is no justice, there shall in fact be no peace. No justice,
No peace.
no justice,
No peace.
no justice,
No peace.
no justice.
No peace.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on with the program. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a second here to bring up a poet here with the Langston Hughes Poets Circle, Jim Moreno. And as we're doing this, I want the families to start thinking about coming up to the stage, okay? We have 6 chairs here, okay? So I'm gonna call off some names here. Now, if you're not called, every family is important to us. Every family is. And we're gonna have a speak out time where the families that are not up here will be able to speak. So, Adam, and Geraldine Blueford. The Sagan Penn family. Victor Ortega family. It's Kenneth Harting's family. Kenneth Harting. Okay. Billy Venable family. Come on. Your mom. And Mario, the family. And so while you're settling in, I'm going to hand the mic to Jim Moreno. And he's going to share some words with us, some soothing words for the families. This is not a joyous occasion, and this is very difficult.
Please repeat after me. This is what democracy looks like.
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 This is what anarchy looks like.
Give yourselves a hand. Let's keep this energy going. I wanted to say my deep condolences for all of you for your losses. I have a poem and a song for you. I will not dance to your war drum. I will not lend my soul nor my bones to your war drum. I will not dance to your beating. I know that beat. It is lifeless. I know intimately that skin you are hitting. It was alive once, hunted, stolen, stretched. I will not dance to your drummed up war. I will not pop, spin, break for you. I will not hate for you, or even hate you. I will not kill for you. Especially, I will not die for you. I will not mourn the dead with murder or suicide. I will not side with you or dance to bombs, because everyone is dancing. Everyone can be wrong. Life is a right, not collateral or casual. I will not forget where I come from. I will craft my own drum. I will gather my beloved near, and our chanting will be dancing, our humming will be drumming. I will not be played. I will not lend my name nor my rhythm to your beat. I will dance and resist and dance and persist and dance. This heartbeat is louder than death. Your war drum ain't louder than this breath. We want to remember our indigenous Californians who know about this kind of a loss. We want to remember the Wintu people who the settlers came in and said, we want to do a feast for you, for your village. And they poisoned all the food. The whole village wiped out, and they threw the bodies away and they claimed the land. And we've got a history of the wealth in California based on that kind of deception and murder. So in that spirit, I offer this song for our brothers and sisters up here who've had deep and terrible losses, and for our indigenous Californians, 350 tribes that were here when the Europeans got here. Who discovered who? So this is the healing and blessing song. I hope all of you feel our community with you today, and that you have some healing and some blessing today. Offer this song in a good way. Li'ia kakichwan ahash east cho hoi mai pe hoi alakoi mai pe hoi kankanu mawa he kantek tokskonin sutich wowak ipna alkanona kai chibi. If you're drowning in your sorrow, you're drowning in your sadness, I ask the dolphin to come to you and help you keep your head above the water. Hey, 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 Nimaway. Yo ho 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 Nimaway. Yo ho ho Nimaway. Hey 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 Nimaway. Hey 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 Nimaway. Yo ho ho Nimaway. Yo ho ho Nimaway. Hey 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 Nimaway. Hey 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 Nimaway. Yo ho ho Nimaway. Yo ho ho Nimaway. Hey, 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 Nimaway. Hey, 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 Nimaway. Yo ho ho Nimaway. Yo ho ho Nimaway. Hey, hey.
start with Sister Geraldine, if you want to start and tell us, tell your story, and then we can go down the line. We sort of allocated 10 minutes towards everyone, just try to get the everyone to have a say. But well, we can go from there. Okay. Do you want to start? And also, after this period, after they speak, we're going to have opportunity for people who want to comment or ask questions of the family to come up, and we'll let you also use this mic to ask a question. So, brother.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us here today. We're in a struggle. It's going to be a long struggle. My son Alan, first of all, I'd like to give thanks to the Oscar Grant Committee, who was the first big tragedy with doing police brutality in Oakland on the springboarding this action. My son Alan Blueford is an 18-year-old man, 18 years young, fixing to graduate high school. He had just went to a senior prom. He was walking down the street with two of his little buddies. They called themselves cousins. They were walking. They had just watched the Mayweather fight. They were in Oakland. We lived in the suburbs right outside of Oakland. But they were in Oakland over a cousin's house, but they called themselves cousins, watching the fight. After the fight, they decided to walk to a store. It's about midnight. He called me about 15 minutes before he walked out there. Anyway, they were on their way to the store. Two police officers accosted these young kids for no reason at all. There was no cause. These police officers actually on their way to a call to a domestic violence case somewhere else. They decided to come off of this call and harass these three young men. My son was 18, the other young man was 18, and there was one 15-year-old young man with him. They wasn't doing anything, hanging at their grandmother's house. They had just got, just had got to watching a fight, which they had on pay-per-view over there. So anyway, these officers pull up on the other side of the street, lights out, jumped out with guns drawn for no other reason than these were young black and brown kids. They grabbed one of the young men's, well, let me back up a little. Anyway, the reason that they said they want to stop Alan and his friends was that they looked like burglary suspects. This is the lie they told, the reason that they stopped them. And then after that, the story changed again and said that this was, looked like one of them had drugs or either a gun. So, we don't know how those two things look the same or whatever, but this was the story they came up with. Anyway, they pulled up on the other side of the street, lights out in the car, it's nighttime, jumped out with gun draws, grabbed one of Alan's friends, gives him rough treatment. Alan runs. He ran over a quarter mile, about 5 city blocks. Alan trips and falls. This police officer shoots himself in the foot. Once he shot himself in the foot, this tragedy was on, it couldn't be stopped. Once he shot himself, because Alan was running, holding his pants on the side while he ran, he figured that he must have had a weapon or something. When he fell on the ground, the police officer shoots himself, think he was shot by someone. Remember, I gotta back up again. This guy, Officer Masso, was an Iraqi war veteran who spent 6 years in the war in Iraq. He left the war and went to New York, where he was charged in a federal lawsuit where he abused a prisoner, Mason tasered him. 11 days after the lawsuit was filed, Mason came out to the Bay Area. So anyway, this Mason is the one who chased my son. My son falls on the ground. He shoots himself in the foot, stands over my son while my son screaming, pleading for his life, and shoots him 3 times in the chest. The report came out the next morning. He said it was a gun battle. All the police on the paper said it was a gun battle, which my son shot the police officer, and the police officer ended up shooting my son. They held back the coroner's report for us for months. We fought for it. We went to the coroner's office. We ended up getting it. The coroner's report shows that my son didn't have no gunpowder residue nowhere on his body, hands. He he didn't have no drugs or alcohol in the system, and it implies that he was shot while he was laying on his back on the ground. So, now this officer, we don't know where he is at this point. He's not back on duty, thank God. But we know with his military history and the lies about this shootout and gun battle, that we wanted more, actually. The DA came out, like they always do, and said this homicide was justified. We're still fighting for justice for my son. We know this homicide is not justified. We just did a direct action at the district attorney office last Tuesday, in which we're putting more pressure on him to charge Masso with some kind of crime. This is an ongoing fight for us. My son was brutally murdered while he laid on his back, screaming, "I didn't do anything." And this is a very tough thing for us to take. My son was 18 years old, finna walk across the stage. He only had 4 classes. The last report card we received from Skyline High 3 weeks after his murder was 2 A's and 2 C's. The principal spoke up for Alan at the school, said Alan worked in the cafeteria in the mornings with disabled kids. He went 7 in the morning, an hour early. Said Alan was a good kid. He worked with students. Even his math teacher came out and said Alan was someone I would like to know outside of the school. He was a really polite, pleasant, and respectful kid. So even with all this, Oakland Police Department still has yet to fire Masso or do anything about this crime. They're hoping it'll go away, but we're not going nowhere. I'm not going nowhere. We're going to fight to the end. And for all the families here, we stand with you in prayer, unity, in whichever way we can do. We know that you guys have took on the ultimate pain that no one else can understand. The family members are the direct link to the family members that was murdered. So stand up for your family. Don't ever stop. If you know your family was murdered and done wrong, stand with God in the righteous cause and be strong with it. Thank all you guys. Here's my wife, Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. I want to give a special thanks to the People's Power Revolution. I want to give a special condolence and a shout out of love and compassion to the families of fallen victims. I want to give thanks to God, who is the head of my life. You see, Alan was my baby, my youngest child. And many of you have maybe seen things on the internet, or you heard us speak or heard me. Whenever I talk about my son, I tune up to cry. And they are tears of pain, because the pain runs so deep when you are robbed. When someone can decide to murder your child. When someone, a whole entire police department and a city can stand up and tell lies on your child. To get up and say that he was in a gun battle with a grown man, my son respected authority. We teach our kids to have respect for their elders. And I know for doggone sure that they have been lying from the day that it happened up until today. They're somewhere telling some lie. And they expect that we go away quietly into this good night. But that's not gonna happen. That is not gonna happen. You see, Alan Blueford's name is gonna live on through change. And you see these families up here? Change is coming. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I can predict the future. And I'm not going to tell you, oh yeah, I know how you feel. Because I don't know how you feel, I know how I feel. I know that there is something missing out of your life because there's something missing out of mine. But you know what? Just as I stand here today, and the next day, and the next day, I'm going to stand strong. And I'm going to plant my feet. And I'm going to put up my dukes. And I'm going to jab back at them. Because there's no way in the world today, not tomorrow, not ever. And if you're sitting there, yeah, this is a sad occasion because we have lost. But stand up on your feet, hold your fists up, and tell them, no justice, no peace. Because we don't have no peace, because we don't have no justice. But wait a minute, I'm not done. Because justice is coming. Justice is mine, said the Lord. And he is going to stand with us and fight with us and guide us. There's no way in the world that anybody around here who is listening or anybody who knows of somebody who lost somebody that you should be standing there with your hands in your lap. Or you should be standing there looking at the next person. Oh, well, what are they going to do? What are you going to do? Get up. Stand up. A wise man once told me if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for everything. Stand up. Get up. Fight back. You see, I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I was sad. Yes, I'm sad. I was depressed. Yes, I was depressed. I was on my knees in a ball crying every day, not knowing what was going to happen. Yes, I decided today's the day. I can't take it no more. I'm going to jump in the pool and just drown. But guess what? That's not who I am. That's not who Alan was. So guess what? I'm standing up because I'm mad. And when I get mad, I'm ready to fight. And guess what? Alan's name is going to live on through change. We are Justice for Alan Blueford Coalition. The acronym is JAB, J-A-B. You better stand up and hold your fist. And when they lie on your child, you better swing back. And when they tell you you can't have an autopsy, you better go down there and sue them. And when they tell you that your son shot a cop, you better stand up and say, no, he didn't. Not my son. Because when you stand for something, then you're gonna win. You're not gonna be blown away. You're not gonna run off into the good night. You're gonna stand up and take a stand for this mess that's going on. We're sick and tired of people dying in the streets. We're sick and tired of them thinking because they got a badge that it's okay. We're sick and tired of them coming in our neighborhoods terrorizing us. This man was in Iraq for 6 years. He come out with the same mentality. We sick and tired of them taking the people out the army and putting them on the streets, thinking that that's the way that it's to live in the community. They don't understand us. They don't understand our community. They don't have no training in the urban city. They just some fools out there in the war, killing innocent women, babies, children, and whoever else they can suicide bomb. They always want to talk about the suicide bombers while they go over there and just shoot whoever they want to. Then they get out the army and come in our neighborhoods and kill our babies. You better stand up. You better take a stand. You better get mad. Because I'm mad and I ain't taking it no more. I ain't scared. I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to help. We moving in a new generation. This is not going to go on. And you think just if Dr. King would have just kept giving speeches, you think he only got arrested one time? You think Rosa Parks rode the bus once? She did it over and over and over again until that one time when it was broadcasted all over the news, when everybody was sick and tired of being sick and tired of all their mess. And guess what? People took to the streets. Reverend CD, we take it to the streets, brother. We going out there. We knocking on doors. We telling them enough is enough. We gonna hold these cops accountable, and we won't go away until this good night. Justice for Alan. Justice for Oscar.
everybody. First, I want to thank you guys for having us. My name is Cindy Mitchell. I'm the sister of Mario Ramero, who was murdered by the Vallejo Police Department on September 2nd, 2012. I say my brother was murdered because he was murdered. This is not a case of excessive force because no force was needed. He was murdered in front of our home while he was sitting in his car with my brother-in-law. The police admit that they didn't identify themselves. However, they hopped out of their cars, shouted, "Put your hands up." They didn't get to finish, "Put your hands up," before they started shooting, okay? They shot at my brother over 30 plus times. In the process, one of the officers hopped on top of the hood of my brother's car and continued to shoot inside of his car. My brother was shot in his face, in his mouth, in his chest, in his hands, in his wrist, in his chest, and underneath his arms. My brother was assassinated, crucified. And what the Vallejo police want you to believe is that my brother hopped out of his car and pointed a fake gun at two officers with two real guns and unlimited bullets. My brother was sane. He was smart. He was not stupid. He was 23. He was killed 16 days before his 24th birthday. The Vallejo Police Department didn't count on the closeness that my family has because we let each other know where we're going and what we're doing in all of our situations, okay? Once my brother was murdered in front of my family as they pleaded for the police officers to stop shooting. While the officer was on top of my brother's car shooting, he's looking at my sister and continuing to shoot my brother, asking her, "What the F am I supposed to do?" My family, they cried and they begged for this officer to stop shooting. They never saw a gun because there wasn't a gun. My brother didn't have a gun. After my brother was killed, he was cut out of his seatbelt. Because his seatbelt was broken and tied into a knot, he wouldn't have been able to exit out of his car, which was the story that they gave in the beginning. They said he hopped out of the car and pointed this fake gun at these two officers with real guns and unlimited bullets. My brother was afraid of getting the seatbelt ticket because the seatbelt was broken and he tied it in a knot. He wouldn't have been able to untie this seatbelt out of this knot, hop out of this car, because his car door was broken. He would have had to roll down the window and open his car door from the outside in order to get out of the car and aim this fake gun. When they cut my brother out of the seatbelt, drug him onto the ground, they zip-tied his hands and then continued to press the blood out of his body as my family watched. They removed my brother's dead body from the crime scene before the coroner got there. And afterwards, they had a corporal from the Vallejo Police Department to plant a gun inside of my brother's car in front of witnesses and steal my brother's seatbelt that he was cut from. It took over a month before my brother was buried because the coroner had my brother's body hidden because they did not want us to see what they had did to my brother. They didn't want us to know. They wanted us to leave him at the morgue and for his body to be cremated so that we would not see just what they had done to him. That didn't happen. Since my brother's murder, we have stood up, we've protested, we've shut down City Hall, we've protested on the police department steps because we know the truth. And there are so many witnesses to the murder of my brother, but the Vallejo Police Department have failed to interview them. They constantly say that these people are unavailable when they were begging to be interviewed. In an attempt to silence us, they've tried to intimidate us, they've ran us off roads, they've come by our house flashing lights, scaring the children, telling them that they fit the description of somebody, then laughing and speeding away. We've been stalked, we've been followed, our phones have been tapped, our internet communications have been interrupted. Our computers have been hacked, all because we're standing up against this murder. Immediately after my brother was killed, the Vallejo police chief told the press that my brother was a parolee who was afraid of going back to prison, and this is why he pointed this fake gun at these two real guns with unlimited bullets. But he knew that my brother had never been to prison and had never been on parole. He secretly admitted that he knew the truth, but he has refused to publicly recant his lies that he has told. The Vallejo Police Department have all conspired to cover up the murder of Mario Ramero. They held my family hostage while they changed the crime scene, while they moved my brother's car before they took pictures, while they waited for the gun to be planted before they took pictures, while they stole the seatbelt that my brother was cut from before they took pictures. And they've attempted to intimidate us and silence us, but we're not going to be silent. We're not going anywhere because my brother's life was important. My brother's life was important just like anyone else's. And we've been called animals for standing up for justice. But we refuse to back down. We refuse to be silent. We're going to continue this fight because there will be justice for Mario Ramero. Thank you.
My name is Ortega, Victor Ortega's wife, and listening to all your stories, I know all about the police lies. I didn't find out that my husband was dead until 4 hours later. He died on June 4th, 2012, and when I look back on that day, I realize now that the police, they're liars. And just looking back, it just hurts my heart, because I used to think that police were good. I did, so I wasn't ever the type of person that had to worry about police officers or anything. So when this all flashed before me, I was like, really? This is for real. And what happened with Victor is that I had an argument with him that morning. And after that, Victor left before the police even showed up on my street. He was already gone. And I came outside because I could see the police cars coming. And I went outside, and Jonathan McCarthy, the officer that shot Victor and killed him, he didn't even talk to me. He didn't come to me and ask me what happened, why am I here, nothing. He got out of his car, took a few steps, jumped back in his car, and that's the last time I seen that man. Never seen him, after that, never heard him, nothing. So I went back in my house, and I'm sitting in my house for about 15 or 20 minutes, and the next thing I know, I see an ambulance coming. So I went back outside again, and then the ambulance guy, he came up to me, he just grabbed my hand, he was like, we're gonna take you to the hospital and get you checked out. And I said, well, I don't really need to go to the hospital. And he said, no, let's go and get you checked out. He was so nice. So I said, okay, I got in there. And then I asked him, I said, do I need to go in there and get my wallet? No, that's fine. So, and I asked him, I said, do you know if the police, if he was looking for my husband, did he find him? He said, I don't know, but I know there's some incident down on Hillary Street. So I said, oh, I didn't know. So I went to the hospital, I was in there for a long time, and the police officer came, and he asked me what happened and stuff. No, he came and he said, this is exactly what he said, word for word. He said, I don't remember his name, but he said, we have your husband in custody. I just need to know what happened. So I said, okay, and I told him the story. Then about maybe an hour later, no, he still was there in my room. So I'm like, okay, I already gave you my information. Why are you still here? So I was kind of nervous, like, why is he here? You know. So then another officer came, and she wasn't in uniform. She was like a detective. She identified herself as a detective. So she asked me again, but what happened? But this time she was recording me, and so she was asking me questions, and then when it was time for me to go, I said, well, let me call my sister. Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. When I was in the hospital, nothing was wrong with me. I didn't even want to go. I didn't need to be there. But when I was there, I was talking on the phone to my sister, my younger sister, and she was saying, she lived with me, and she was saying, there's an officer here. He keeps on telling, he told me not to leave. And I said, well, tell him to come up here. They know I'm at the hospital. And then I hung up with her, and then I was still there. And the nurse came in about 5 minutes later, and he said, he unplugged my phone, and he goes, was there something wrong with your phone? Because we could hear your conversation in the other room. And I was like, no. But when I look back at it, he just took the phone because he didn't want me to, or my sisters or my family to tell me what happened to Victor. So after that, when he was getting ready to leave, and I was in the hospital for went to emergency room, so I was in there about 4 or 5 hours. So when I was getting ready to leave, the detective lady, she's like, you want me to call your sister? And I was like, sure, you know, and then she went out the room, and she came back and said, your sister's not answering, you want me to text her? I said, sure. Come to find out, my sister never received but one call or one text. So when I got out there, she goes, well, before we leave, a social worker wants to talk to you. So now I'm like, oh, they must be trying to take my kids. Like, that's the only thing I can think. So the social worker comes in there, and she looked at me. She didn't say anything, she just looked at me. And then she said, I'll be right back. And she left. So I'm like, okay, what was that? So then the detective comes back in the room, and we was getting ready to leave. The doctor gave my discharge papers and everything. And then she said, we was walking out, and then she goes, oh, wait a minute, we have to go talk to the social worker. So I was like, okay. And so I sit in this room, and she was sitting there, then the other officer and the social worker, and I was sitting there, and then she goes, what I'm about to tell you is going to be very devastating to you. Your husband's dead. Just like that. And I was like, what? Like, what do you mean? And he got into a fight with the police officer. And I said, no. No, he didn't. So after that, I went home and everything, and then that was on June 4th. That was the only person that told me. When I asked them what happened, you know what they told me? We don't know. And so only thing I couldn't watch the news that day. So I actually didn't watch it for a couple of days, but my family did. And so I guess the first thing that they said on the news was that 3 officers were there, and he had a gun or something, and so they all shot him. That was the first story that they came up with. Then the second story, that the one officer dropped his gun, and then Victor picked it up and was pointing at him. He said that, and then the next one was saying that he was just reaching for the gun. But, so, she gave me a business card, the detective, and said that the sergeant will come and talk to you and tell you, he'll call you and he'll tell you everything happened. That conversation didn't happen until July the 11th because I called him. So, basically, they tried to say that Victor had a gun or the officer's gun fell, but when I went knocking on doors in the area, I did that myself. All the witnesses, nobody seen anything, but everybody, a lot of people heard, and one of the witnesses was actually like right on the other side of the fence, and he said, I heard the handcuffs. I heard that man put the handcuffs, and I heard your husband saying, are you kidding me? I'm gonna sue you. So I talked to all the witnesses, I did that, and I just was like, this is not gonna happen. We're not gonna just sit here and be quiet. We're not gonna believe their story. So I think that's the wrong family. So we're fighting, and part of the struggle, just along with all of you guys, and my heart goes out to all of you guys. And I pray every day for everybody. I know I haven't met you guys or anything, but I see you guys on TV and everything, so, but it's very hard. I have a 6-year-old daughter. Well, she just turned 7 yesterday. A 7-year-old daughter, and my son will be 1 in July. So when his father died, he was only 10 months old. So, but it's hard, and sometimes it's hard for me to talk, but I told Victor and I told my kids, I made a promise that we will get justice for him. it's gonna be a long fight, but we're in it to the end. That's right. So our next, we're gonna have a meeting on Monday, and our next one is we're gonna go and have a press conference at the police station because they're gonna retract the lies. Because they said that Victor picked up the gun and was pointed at him, but then they told us, this is what they said, that we knew that day that that didn't ever happen. But see, they don't want to let the public know that because they don't want the public to get involved. But I feel like the public needs to get involved and they need to see how the So they admitted that to us and they told us that. So now we're going to make sure that the whole San Diego and the world knows that they're liars. Yeah, expose them exactly because this has to stop. And I've been noticing that every time I watch the news, it's like it's not even really the criminals killing people anymore. It's the cops. Every time I see on the news, it's the police doing it. Exactly. So I know in my heart that we haven't got word from the DA yet. I met with the DA, but she's still investigating the case. But I prayed about it, and God is faithful. But you know what? I have so many dreams and I have all these visions and everything. I can't really get into them, but I know in my heart that Jonathan McCarthy is going to jail. Thank you for everybody's support because this is very important to us. Because if you knew Victor, the type of person that he is, the lies don't even add up to his character. And I can't let him just die in vain and just think that, oh, I'm just gonna believe. I have to show them, like, for them to lie like that on Victor, it's like, I can't let it happen. They don't have enough respect. They killed the man, then you're gonna slander his name? I'm not having it. Thank you.
My name is Wanda Johnson. I'm the mother of Oscar Grant. Oscar was murdered on January 1st, 2009 at the Fruitvale BART station in Oakland, California. First, I thank God and I thank you for this opportunity to just stand before you and just share a little with you. On December 31st, which is my birthday, Oscar and I was able to celebrate that day together. And before he took BART, me and him had some gumbo together and laughed together, and then I instructed him to go ahead and take BART to San Francisco where they were going to have the fireworks for New Year's. And he was like, oh, Mom, I'm gonna drive. I said, no, go ahead and take BART, because, you know, if you guys are out there drinking and stuff, you don't need to drink and drive. And so Oscar said, okay, Mom, I'll take BART just for you. And never did I think that as Oscar took BART, that him and his friends, they went on the BART train, and they said an altercation had occurred on the BART train. And so they got off on the Fruitvale BART station, him and his friends, and as they got off, an officer was coming and approaching them with the taser, telling them, you know, to get against the effing wall and using a lot of profanity at them. And as several of the young men got against the wall, a couple of them went back on the train, and so the officer was still, you know, got back on the train and said what he was going to do to the young men, and Oscar and another young man got off the train and went against the wall. One of them tried to go against the wall, but the officer pinned one down on the ground by his hair, pulled him on the ground. And as my son got against the wall, he ended up sitting down, and another officer ran up. That officer, as he ran up, he was running up to point at his taser. So as he pointed his taser at my son's chest, my son was able to take his last picture, and that was the picture of him taken of the officer of having the taser pointed at him. And this was all in evidence that my son had taken the picture with him pointing the taser. And so when he tried at the end to say that he could tell the taser from his gun, we know that that was a lie. We know that that was a lie. We know it was a lie because the taser and the gun first are different weight, and they were different. They looked different. And so my son had taken that picture, And then as one of the officers was tackling a young man, my son stood up and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he was telling his friends, you know, "Be calm, we're going home, don't worry about it." And so the officer, as my son stood up, he ran over there and hit my son. And so my son put his hands up like this and scooted down on the wall back to the ground. And then the other officer came and grabbed my son and threw him over. And then one had him pinned in his back. He was about 250 pounds. He had his knee on his neck. And the other one was on his legs, and that's when he stood up and shot my son, and they said he was resisting arrest. But how could you resist arrest? My son couldn't breathe, I'm sure, because he had 250 pounds on his neck. And he couldn't breathe, and the officer got up and shot him and killed him. And then they said, "Oh, well, we thought he was going for the gun." And one of the things that I have learned from this that I really is important to know is, as my son was with his friends, they took his friends down to the police station and they talked to them. And so his friends were saying anything. So it's important to know your rights, because they didn't have to say anything. So what his friends said, they tried to turn around in the court and use against him. And so it's important that you don't, if the police stop you, if you don't have your attorney, you don't have to talk to them. And they kept my son's friends there for hours trying to question them about what had occurred. And so these young men, I don't think, knew, and so they began to speak on, you know, different things, probably whatever the officer want them to say, because they know how to coach you into saying to make it seem like it's the person's fault. And so they went ahead and they took my son to the hospital. His fiance called me and told me that he had been shot. And when I got to the hospital, the social worker came to me and said, "There's been an accident. Your son is in serious condition. We don't know if he's going to make it. And they're doing surgery." And so they did the surgery, and he died the next morning. They said he had so much internal bleeding they couldn't stop the bleeding. And so one of the things that God has shown me, you know, children are a gift from God. And we have to work with them, nurture them, protect them, fight for them. And I know Oscar would want me to fight for him the rest of my life, and not just for him, but to fight for others. To fight. I realize in this life that it's two fights, and I always say this, it's two fights that you have to have. You have to have a spiritual fight, understanding that you're not fighting against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness of all in high places, and that you have to have a physical battle to say, you know what, you're doing wrong and I'm not going to accept it. And through that, we must understand, as we study in the spiritual, that it talks about this stuff. It talks about the injustices that we'll face. It talks about how the judges are even bribed in the courtroom. When we sat in that courtroom, and all the lies that they continued to tell about my son, how they tried to demonize him and make it seem like the officer was the victim. When the officer was on the stand, he began to cry, and he got to sit up there and cry for 10 or 15 minutes in front of the jury. But when the young men got on the stand and they cried as they were testifying, we had to break for recess. So we understand that, you know what, our children are our heritage. We have to fight for what we believe in. We have to fight for what's right. We cannot allow the judicial system to continue to allow our children to be incarcerated, allow our children to fight one another. We're not bringing the guns into our cities. The police officers are. We're not bringing the drugs into our cities. The higher ups are. And we have to understand that corruption comes from the top. We have to understand it's not coming from the people at the bottom, it's coming from the top. It's coming from those that have the money, the finances to bring it all into the communities and to dispense it throughout the community. So we must understand that the judges, we must understand that the DAs and the district attorneys, they all work together. They're not on your side. They're not on your side. They're not on your side. We found that out when we walked in the courtroom and we listened to the judge. We knew that whatever he could do to get the officer off, that's what he was going to do. He said, if you protest and all this, we'll make this case, we'll put it off forever if we have to. He didn't want to even try the course. He said, this is only going to take 2 weeks. This is an easy case. Basically, he didn't have the heart or the compassion, and they don't have the heart and compassion, a lot of them, to allow the justice system to do its job the way it was supposed to be created. It was supposed to be created with fair, honest men who would judge fairly and rightly. And the justice system has turned around and it's not created that way anymore because we have crooked people. We have judges who are taking bribes, judges who don't like your color, that are standing on the bench, that will not allow a verdict to come in favorable to you. And so we must understand that we have to come together as one to fight against the justice system, against police brutality, because it's bigger than just police brutality. You know, the biggest gang is the gang in blue. Yeah. See, they don't need permission to kill you. They could kill you and then come up with an excuse of why they killed you and get away with it. They get paid administrative leave for it. But you let us kill somebody, we're going straight to jail. Okay, the bail's going to be so high, if we get a bail, that we're not even going to be able to get out. Okay, and then we'll end up in jail doing a 25 to life sentence, making people's genes, making people's license plates. So we must understand that we have to come together and stand against police brutality. And how do we do that? We learn to accept people for who they are. We learn to work together. It's not just my fight. It's not just the Blueford's fight. It's not just the Ortega's fight. But it's all of our fights coming together as one, fighting against the injustices that we face. Coming and saying, we're not going to take it anymore. We're not going to take it anymore. We want the officer who killed my son to get more than 11 months. All he got sentenced to was 11 months. If you do get a drug charge, you might get more than 11 months. All he got was 11 months. He should have got a 25 to life sentence, just like these people who killed other people get. And so we must understand the only way that it's going to change, and I agree with what the Reverend said earlier, that we have to go to Washington. We have to come out in the communities. We have to stand together and fight, because you know what? If we don't fight, there will be no justice. So we must not have any peace. We have to fight so we can have some justice, and I thank you.
Well, hello everyone. I am Cephas Uncle Bobby Johnson. I am Oscar Grant's uncle, and of course Wanda's my sister. And I just thank God today that He has given her voice, because when this initially happened, somehow I was thrust into the forefront as being the family spokesman. So just a word to all the men that are in this room. It is important we as men stand and represent our families. There is no love like a mother's love for her child. Of course, there's no love like a father's love for his son or his family. But more importantly, we have to become that vanguard. We must take into our heart and realize that some of us must die in order for our families to live and exist on this earth. And that is the position that I have taken, that in order for these mothers, because see, I'm personally tired of seeing teary-eyed mothers. I will die for the sake of a mother today. Because you don't know the pain that these mothers suffer. And to hear them, you have to understand, develop that empathy, and put your feet in their shoes, and imagine how you would feel. Imagine how you would need the support and want that support. Imagine. I'm going to say a few things. You know, my sister kind of elaborated on it, but it's really important for you to understand that Johannes Mesley, as you know, was the first officer in the state of California history to be charged, arrested, convicted, and sent to jail. Okay, we did not get a victory, we made history. So it is real important. It is real important that you absorb that and you hear what I'm saying, because all these faces on my shirt right now and these mothers that you hear have not gotten not one bit of justice concerning the death of their children. And what's real important here is for you to understand that Johannes Mesley, attorney, appealed to the 9th District Circuit of Court to have that involuntary manslaughter dropped. He failed at that level. He appealed to the California Supreme Court to have that involuntary manslaughter dropped, and he failed at that court. However, it is now going to the U.S. Supreme Court. And so it behooves us, and I will not shut my mouth until we have actually secured that history, because though we say we have made history, they're trying to turn that over so that these officers could continue to kill at will. They call it a freezing point because with the thought of them might go into jail, they might think before they shoot, and thereby what they say may lose their life. But think about all the babies that are losing their life without them thinking. So we have to make them think. We have to ensure that this history is not overturned, because our fight is still going on. You know, and let it be known that the jury came back with a guilty verdict on the gun enhancement charge, which was an automatic prison sentence. And because my sister talked about the criminal justice system, how the district attorney, how the judges, and even the system all work in hand to make sure that these officers never get charged, is a fact. Because that judge took that guilty verdict of the gun enhancement that the jury of his peers brought back off the table. He turned our jury trial into a bench trial because he felt he just could not understand how he erred in his instructions to the jury. He claimed. So we got to be clear and understand that even though these other families have not even gotten a bit of justice, if they can get into the courtroom, then there's another big question. Will they get it in the courtroom? And what we've found is that you do not even get it in this criminal justice system. And so I want to say this, I want to clean up some, not clean up some stuff, but add something to Alan Blueford, of course Mario Ramero, and just the fact of what's going on. California has what you call a policeman's bill of rights. And I don't want to take too long, but I need to get this out. California had a policeman's bill of rights that really came into effect in 1977. And that's part of the reason why we don't get any officers in the state of California incarcerated for the murder, because this piece of legislation protects them. And our pastor, C.D. Witherspoon, is right. We have to take this to D.C. We have to begin to address this very issue of the policeman's bill of rights. Officer Masso comes from New York, the 47th precinct. And in that precinct, he was involved in beating up a young man in jail and was actually a part of a lawsuit. He slipped out of that state into California and became an officer here. And in the short period of time that he was here, he ended up killing Alan Blueford. You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying that them officers in Vallejo that killed Mario Ramero within a 4-month time period has killed 6 other young men in the city of Vallejo. We're talking about in a 4-month time period, 7 people killed by these same rogue police officers. And Johannes Mesley in high school was sued because he slapped a Hispanic female in school. First year on the BART, he beat up a young African-American man. Second year on the BART, he beat up another African-American young man. Third year on the BART, he beat up another African-American young man who simply flipped a cigarette butt, and he was reprimanded for it, but not to the degree that it can be exposed to where he was a troubled officer. That same year, he beats up this young man named Kenneth Harting, who filed a civil lawsuit against him. It was all talked about, and this happened 45 days before Oscar was murdered. I need you to hear the chain of events, because this is always about their state of mind when they kill us. It's always about their state of mind, but not their history. That night at the West Oakland BART station was a young African-American man that supposedly had a gun. They chased, he jumps off the platform, incapacitates himself, sad he did have a gun, and then they get a call that there's a black and Hispanic gang fight. So Johannes Mersley and his partner, Wolfington, gets in their car and they testify that they felt they was going into combat. Officer Mansell came out of combat. They said that they felt they was going into combat and that they had to come ready. Within 2 minutes when he hit that platform, my nephew Oscar was dead. He claimed he mistaken his taser for his gun, or his gun for his taser. And if you haven't seen the video, I suggest that you take a look at the video of Oscar Grant, so you can get a gist of what we're talking about, what families are straining and struggling and going through when it comes to police murders in our community. And if you have a pen, please write this down. Ernest Duenes, out of Manteca, California. I need you to see that video so you can begin to feel the pain of what we're talking about, police brutality. Ernest Duenes. Ernest Duenes, D-U-E-N-E-Z. Please look that video up. And Kenneth Harting. These are actual videos that you can see. I always say when I speak, we are our brother's keeper. In order for a change to occur, some of the best evidence we can have that helped us with Oscar was video. Because that same night Oscar was murdered, there was two other young men that was also shot and killed by the police. Adolph Grimes in New Orleans. Not too many people know about this young man. 14 times in the back, 22 years old, just like Oscar, the very same night. And Robert Tolan of Bel Air, Texas, the son of a baseball player, a pro baseball player, shot in the back, but he lived. But he was laying face down just like Oscar, shot in the back, and the bullet went through his lung into his liver and ended his baseball career. But this young man happened to live. And no one really knows about those cases, and they both were racially profiled just like Oscar. So it is real important that we take a look at what's happening. And I'm gonna say this and be quiet. During the heydays of lynching here in the US, it was recorded that every 4 days, a black man or black female or child would be hung, lynched. You listen to what I'm saying, every 4 days. But the Malcolm X grassroots report just in July 12th, July 7th, 12 came out with a report that every 36 hours, a black man, black child, or black female will be killed across this United States by a police officer. Now we're only saying black, male, female, or child. We didn't even put in the equation our brown brothers and our poor white people that are also dying at the hands of police. Because if we equate that, we can realistically cut that time down in half, if not 2/3. So we can almost say, really, that every 24 hours, somebody, one of us, is going to die at the hands of the state-sponsored terrorism that we have going on in our community. So we have to stand up. We have to unite. And we have to remember, like my sister talking about spirituality and principality, is that there's a spiritual war going on and there's a physical war. What helped us is we always looked at it through our spiritual eyes and getting our justice. We believe and trust that there's a higher power up here that will bring the victory to us. Because when we look at it through our physical eyes, we feel defeated. There's no victories. It's seeing that we can really see to really gauge, are we making progress? So believe this, these rallies and these protests is not being done in vain. It's for our babies. It's for our babies. It's because what they see us do is going to empower them so that they can really change what's occurring in our society. So let them see us represent, let them see us unite, and let them see us willing to die for their sake. Thank you.
I'm Billy Venable, murdered by the San Diego Police, October 11, 2003. And because all these mothers and fathers and uncles, everything in their story is the same thing with the courts and the district attorneys and the judges and the medical staff at the hospitals, everything is exactly the same. So that part I won't go over. Billy was 26 years old. He had made maybe not so many good choices. He was on parole. He would have been off in 6 months. And he was on a violation. He was in the car with his brother. They were coming down the street, stopped at a stop sign, and then proceeded forward. And then the car, unmarked car, came up behind them. Well, excuse me, a police car, a black and white cruiser. They talked to his brother, and then they went back to their car and did some things on the radio. But basically what I want to say to all these families is that this is so much bigger than our children. And a new day is coming.
Yeah. Right.
The beauty in this is that people care.
Yes.
So I had a poem, because there were many poems that people wrote, but there was one that, and my sister's sitting down there in the red shirt, and she called me and she brought it to me 2 days later, and it was raining and the wind was blowing. She says, Iman, I need to give you this. Somebody wrote this, even though he has poems and books by all. We don't even know who this person was, but this person didn't even know him. And they said, it was entitled Bill, and it said, I did not know the man. I did not know his story. What I do know for a fact is that I heard a single gunshot, and now 4 young children are without their daddy. 4 young children so young that they may someday need a photograph, too young to remember his smile. They may need the memory of others to remember his personality. They may need a miracle to remember his hugs. One thing these little angels will never forget is how their daddy died and who took their daddy away. They will remember how loved their daddy was by so many that did know the man and that did not know the man. So my family is grateful today. Billy weighed 135 pounds. He wore a size 8 shoe. And 3 police officers beat him and shot him in the head with a 9mm weapon at close range. The police intimidated the witnesses. They threatened them for 5 years. Took us 5 years to go to trial with pennies and nickels and dimes from all of you people in here. They threatened people's families that maybe had a son that was in prison and told them, if you testify for this Billy Venable case, we're gonna get your son. They did all of that. But those people testified anyway.
also need to understand, as the mother said, the system is not working. We have to make it work. It's not working. Any job that you and I go for, we have to qualify ourselves for it. Well, the qualities of a peace officer is, first of all, you can't have fear. You have to have compassion. You have to have empathy. You have to be humble. And you have to realize that all life is precious and can never be replaced. So until that happens, I have come to realize until those human beings and that whole system is brought to nothing, like a flood, that we are going to have that in our lives. But we mustn't give up, because it's not over. The day may come when I'm gone. I'm not even alive anymore, but my grandchildren, or your grandchildren, or your great-grandchildren. So I want to thank everybody here today. And my sister gave me this. She told me the time is always right to do what is right. There is no time limit. There's no statute of limitations. And all the judges and the jury, they have to live with the decision they make. And the mother is right. They put, when we go to trial, the victim is on trial, not the officers. Not the officers, the victim. The police report was 500 and some pages. It took us a year to get it. And two lawyers took it, because they listed the police officers as the victims. And the dead 26-year-old young man, father of 4, as a suspect.
How's it going? I'm Mario Lewis from 100 Strong. 100 Strong is dedicated to helping whomever we can in the streets. We know that we have the police department and criminals. There's a very thin line. You guys have to understand that. And right now there is an elimination process going on with our young men in the streets. Let me get over here so you guys won't get any feedback. And that process of elimination starts as soon as that child is born. You have to understand that too, because this system wasn't built for that child. And right now we have something that's going on in the prisons. You got to get this information out. We got to make sure we get these information out, because these people are out here trying to gather intel using our kids. These guys are buying these cell phones for prison. I don't know if you guys understand what's happening right now. Who's selling the cell phones to them? You got to understand that too. The prison guards are selling the cell phones to them, but it's the prison that's actually gathering the intel through those phones. You guys have to understand. I'm going to be very brief, because I'm actually taking a trip up to the Bay Area in a few more minutes. I'm going to be meeting with a brother named David Johnson. He was from the Soledad 6, okay? They call him Jab. And I'm also going to be meeting with the Black Riders Liberation Party and some of my other comrades up there when I'm up there. So I'm going to be very brief. We have to protect our kids. We have to protect ourselves. I think my brother said it's just us. It truly is just us out in the streets, okay? We're gonna have to have more forums like this to educate people on what's really going on out there in the streets. A lot of these young kids are out here, they don't have any clue of what's behind the doors of these prisons. They don't have any clue of what's truly the enemy that's out there lurking behind them, ready to put them down. So until we stop fighting each other, okay? Because I'm not down for the tribalism also. Once we stop fighting each other and start trying to educate our kids, really educate them, then we are going to still be in shambles. The only thing I want to say is all power to the people. I'm humbled by the Grant family. One of my comrades up there is Brother JR. He did an Operation Small Axe, I believe, which was screened down here. So I'll be meeting with JR while I'm up there too. And I'm very humbled by all the families that are here. I'm humbled by your sacrifices also. Okay? So peace and blessings to you all. And I'm sorry that I'm so short today.
I wanted to go ahead and introduce another panelist that just showed up. Important panelist. This is Brother Gabriel Seth Conaway, who's going to be speaking on the issue of Bradley Manning, a very important case that you'll need to hear about. But Margaret, go ahead. You start.
Okay, is that all right? Apologize for that. I have probably a little bit of a more factual presentation. I hope that's okay. I'm certainly moved by everything I've heard so far, and there's so much wrong. So let me tell you what we tried to do to make it a little bit better. The American Civil Liberties Union is an organization dedicated to
Hurricane Sandy. Of all the times I ever wanted to go to New York, I ended up going there with a hurricane. And but it was an honor to. We still drove through Hurricane Sandy. We were told to stay off the roads, and but we were determined to go sit down. And he's like the Messiah of the movement. We were able to sit down with Mumia Abdul-Jamal face to face. And Mumia, I mean, he was just amazing, It was to hear the words Oscar Grant and Alan Blueford come out of Mumia's mouth was like, damn, you're locked up. And you're a political prisoner, and you know more being locked up about most people do in the communities, and you're still fighting for two young men, Oscar Grant and Alan Blueford. You've spoken about them, and you're locked up, and you're still fighting behind these bars for young men and young women all throughout the community. That's pretty amazing, and I think we should be fighting for Mumia Abdul-Jamal. Because he sure is doing a lot of fighting for us inside the belly of the beast. And I just wanted to say one more thing, and I'm gonna end it. This system, how it operates, it's crazy. You can almost kill somebody, like Bobby said earlier. You can almost kill somebody in New York and be as a police officer and come to Oakland, California, and kill young Alan Blueford. That's what Nassau did. Oakland, our former police chief is now in Baltimore, where young men have been being killed. Bax, he's left Oakland, and now he's been rewarded with a job in Baltimore. And Bratton, who has destroyed communities in New York and Los Angeles, now he's rewarded with a job in Oakland, California. So this circle of these beasts do not stop. It continues. No matter what type of crime you do as a police officer, this is what we have to stand up for. There's a job waiting for you in another police department. And that's what we have to stand up. You're not coming to this community. And we have to start thoroughly checking these backgrounds. Just like they do background checks on us, we could do it on them. And we've got to keep reporting what they do. Thank you so much.
Okay. Wow. Interesting panel that we have here. You know, my name is Reverend Dennis Malone, and as I was being introduced, they introduced me as the co-chair of FACTS, which is Families to Me in California Street Strikes Law. The purpose, or the reason why I was invited here, was to speak on ban the box, which is that question, have you ever been convicted of a felony in your job applications? Ban the box was started by an organization called All of Us or Not, up in Oakland, in San Francisco, Bay Area. And when they came down here in 2004, wanted to start a chapter, I was then president of FACTS. But we had a proposition on the ballot, Prop 66 at that time, to fight for 3 strikes. And we lost that one, first go round. Prop 66, we lost that due to Arnold Schwarzenegger's last minute commercials and scaring folks away from the polls and voting in favor of amending California Street Strikes law. So so we lost that round, and our organization really didn't have nowhere to go. So Dorsey Nunn and Linda Evans came down from Frisco and invited and introduced All of Us or None. So I introduced that to FACTS at the time, and so we assumed the identity of All of Us or None. And that's how we began here in San Diego with our chapter of All of Us or None. All of Us or None is a program primarily designed to organize those who have been in prison, have felony convictions, and wanted to know how they can win some of their rights back. So All of Us or None, we are now, I'm going to say 9 chapters strong in California and 39 chapters across the states. All of Us or None is the movement where we are organizing the formerly incarcerated to stand up against all the injustices, the barriers and the discriminations that we face and our families face on a day-to-day basis. One of our campaigns happens to be the Ban the Box campaign. This particular campaign, we believe, it targets the formerly incarcerated from even seeking employment, because they feel as though they ask that question and they know they have a felony, they're most likely not going to get hired by that company. So we look at that as a discrimination and a deterrent, because it's been proven that a person who is unemployed is 7 times more likely to go back to prison than one that is. So it's very important that we change the policies and the laws that are discriminating against us. In San Francisco, they banned the box. They were the first ones to ban the box on city and county employment. And now, there are 7 states who ban the box in this country. So, yeah, of all places, you'd be surprised at states that have banned the box. But the reason why I say that is to show that we can overcome these barriers and obstacles that discriminate against us and our families if we do, as my brother next to me, I think call your name, was mentioning, organize. We must organize, 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 organize until we defeat those who stand up against us. Society by itself is not going to do it. Everything's fine and dandy. Ever since the war on terrorism in this country, those with felony convictions have been getting dogged out. Everything has become so much tougher. Background checks are the norm. So everywhere you go, they're gonna run a background check. And if you don't learn how to present yourself on a job interview, or how to answer that dreadful question, which shouldn't be there in the first place, until, as we believe, it's your, if the employer feels as though you're qualified for that particular job, and they call you back, then you get the opportunity to sell yourself and present yourself and explain how you be an asset to that company, and explain that your felony conviction is 15, 20 years old, or what have you. Please give you the opportunity on an equal basis. So with that, and with the popularity of Ban the Box, now there is a new bill that's being introduced, and it's called AB 218. AB 218 is a bill that's been offered, and we encourage those who, what that bill says is that for state, government, county jobs, not to ask that question about your felony conviction until after you have become a candidate for that position. So that would mean the second or third interview. Well, then it gives you an opportunity to present yourself and explain your felony conviction. Now there's some positions that having a felony conviction you'll never be able to apply for, like a police officer, working in schools. That's understandable. But the majority of jobs you should be able to obtain if you're qualified. And so AB 218 is the bill that's been presented. And we have a petition on the back desk over there for AB 218, which everyone will sign it in favor of getting that bill introduced so we can overcome this ban the box issue. Because we believe if the government takes the lead on this, then private employers will be so to adapt it into their hiring practices as well. So we got to start somewhere. And if the government is so much preaching about re-entry and rehabilitation seems to be the theme of the day, then prove it. Put it up or shut up. My background is I served 10 years in the prison system. 8 years was in the federal prison system, where I became self-educated and understanding that I had to change my life and so forth and so on. But I transferred. The state had a hold on me, so I went over to the state institutions where I witnessed so many people being warehoused, not educating themselves about nothing. Back then, they had weights on the yards, and that's all that seemed to matter was lifting weights, but they weren't lifting and putting nothing in their heads as far as preparing themselves for society. So one of the commitments I made to my cellies and folks I've become close with in the state joint was I would come back and work to change the conditions that they have inside these prisons. And that was one commitment that I'm just so grateful that I was able to fulfill. So 6 years later, I went back to the same prison where I paroled from as an instructor. And so I worked at Donovan until they escorted me out. Said I was over familiarizing myself with the inmates. Hell, I've been in the cell with these guys. These guys are my brothers, you know, and I'm committed to them. Well, we don't, for security reasons, we're going to actually. So I was escorted from there, but the thing that really that I took from that first firing from Donovan was, hey, these folks in here are trying to keep their jobs. They don't want no one to really succeed because it destroys job security. And it really hit home when last year I was asked to go back in Donovan and work again as a facilitator for the pre-release program. And we were getting people jobs before they even got out. So they heard we got that program. It lasted about 6 months, but the success rate was too good. And I got a chance to really infiltrate on a different level. I was able to sit in the lunchrooms with the correctional officers, with the administrative staff, and really get in tune with what was being said about the prison industrial complex and how they really feared for their jobs and how they had a real distaste for their clients, which were the inmates. So the insight was a major plus for me, and it's allowed me to grow personally and really understanding that we got a lot of work to do out here. And as we begin to change public policy out here, we got to understand that folks want to keep their $100,000 a year jobs. They're not trying to see folks being no early release, no being shifted off to county jails, and all these different transitions that they have in place. And understand that when you go to prison, you're a commodity. You're treated no more than a number, and they use you to their benefit. Even though they're breaking up the families, they're breaking up the communities, they're causing. What was shocking to me more than anything else was the genocidal thing, because African Americans were in there like deep. I mean, in the state of California, African Americans make up maybe about 6% of the population, general population. Inside the prisons, they make up like 36%. So it seems like generations were just being lost inside these institutions. And until we learn how to organize among ourselves, to change these public policies, to join into these different organizations, and not splinter ourselves in these organizations. But because you belong to one organization, don't mean you can't belong to another. And another, and another, and invite others to come in until we get the political power and develop the movements where we can succeed like this gathering here. This is the perfect idea. Now where do we take this movement? Where do we take this assembly and have it reform, have it repeated again and again so we don't feel as though we're preaching to the choir? Most people in here belong to some organization or part of some movement. We need to attract those who are out there believing in nothing and get them engaged in this process, because that's where our numbers are. That's where our true numbers are. So all of us are none in our campaign. We believe that you can stay with your organization, your church, wherever you affiliate yourselves with, but still push our agenda as we push your agenda. We have to work more closely together to build the numbers and have the political impact that we all need to make a difference in City Hall or wherever we're fighting, at the state level, local level, so we can